Hello and welcome along to the VMTV Rugby Pod. As ever, Matt and Alan joining me. And what a weekend, Alan, it's going to be. Ireland going for a Grand Slam for the first time in Dublin against England. How excited are you?
I'm very excited. I think it's a wonderful situation. I think if you go back to before the start of the tournament, I think people asking for all the pundits' predictions and ex-players and people working in the media, I think I'll be honest in saying I didn't think we'd have a Grand Slam situation in this last round. I thought maybe France might have caught us in Dublin, or maybe Wales or Scotland might have got nicked one against Ireland. But I think that was on the back of probably my nerves from after 2019 and what happened, and that's obviously well documented. Similar situation going into that year as world number one. This time around, I think this Irish team have handled the pressure. They've handled the tag, and I think the tag of number one in the world has been probably more deserving, given the results we've seen and the way they've played. So I think they're getting a lot of credit, and maybe we underestimated them a little bit how good they can be and how consistent they have been. That doesn't give them any right to win a Grand Slam at the weekend. They still have got to go out and perform, but it sets up for a wonderful weekend. Cheltenham all this week, Paddy's Day tomorrow. Special kind of whole atmosphere around, not just in Dublin but throughout Ireland. It's a holiday weekend. So if I'm on the English team or in the English squad, I'm thinking, let's go and spoil the party.
Yeah, Matt, Ireland have named their team. Gibson Park in, Henshaw in, Ryan Baird. Obviously, there's injuries for all those big calls apart from Gibson Park. He comes in to start. But the calls you would have made, Matt, and, it's such a strong 23, never mind a 15.
Yeah, I agree with all the selection. I think, Andy Farrell deserves huge credit for his selection policy, not just for this game, but over the last 12 months, the way he's developed players, produced depth within the squad. I mean, who would have thought that Tom O'Toole would be sitting on a bench for a Grand Slam decider a year ago? And that's a credit to Tom, but it's also a credit to Andy for giving players like Tom opportunity in A games, and then obviously with a few injuries, Tom's shown what he can do, and as have a number of other players that aren't in the matchday 23. There's Ryan Baird starting. Now, we all know Baird's incredible athleticism. Probably a criticism I've heard of him was he was maybe a little bit immature in his decision-making process, but Baird has grown and moved, been excellent for Leinster, and I think is a huge prospect for the future, knowing that we've got Henderson and Burns injured. So how wonderful is it to have that depth in second row? Jamison Gibson Park, without being in any way derogatory to Conor Murray, who's one of our all-time great players, he does put pace on the game. And when that pace is put on the game, the defence of the opposition really struggles. And he will put a pace on the game that the English defence will really find hard to cope with. And I think if we're not talking about England right now, but I do have to acknowledge that their defence has been appalling, absolutely appalling. And their defence against France, almost every aspect, their kick chase, their set play defence, their phase defence, there was no line speed to it, no accuracy, and there were more gaps in the Sydney Harbour heads. You could have driven the Queen Mary through some of those gaps. But I do think that's a great selection. Robbie Henshaw coming back, he's got a lot of experience at outside centre, much better for us than Bundy there, who was a better inside centre. Robbie's got both. Right across the park, Peter Armani was magnificent last week, earned his role. Conan goes back to the bench, was magnificent when he came on. Do we get Josh Van der Fleet to throw the ball in again? The only thing we don't want is Cian Healy taking the tap kicks because he does an air swing. But, it's a really powerful Irish team that is reaping the benefits of 15 months to 2 years of excellent selections from Andy Farrell and his staff.
Alan, it's obviously disappointing for Ian Henderson, who you rate, but Ryan Baird, you've always been a big advocate of him. You think he's, if I'm right in saying, really athletic, which obviously he is, but also just a really good player and hopefully going to progress from here and keep progressing.
Yeah, he's still young, isn't he? And Ian Henderson by no means is finished. I think he's had a tough season with injuries. Tried to get back and get some match practice pre-Christmas with Ulster, got back and got games under his belt, and was obviously a big boost to have him back in the Irish squad. But Ryan Baird is a different type of player. He's what you'd call, without being disrespectful to any second rows in the past, he's your modern day athletic machine around the field. This guy is just so fit. He can step people. He's so quick. He can score tries from 60, 70 yards out. We've seen him do that with Leinster. There is a difference, a step up when you go to the top level. And, you know, he would be really tested if he started in a World Cup against France, against New Zealand, against South Africa. You're coming up and you think about Etzebeth and Diaga and these guys. So that's the level, and that's the top level, and it takes time. You need experience. I think he's after getting bigger physically. I think there's no reason why he can't consistently become, you know, a star at this level, because I think he has all the attributes. But given the way the game has gone, it'll be interesting to see what Matt thinks of this as a coach. I think the teams that are being successful at the moment are the ones that are playing rugby, i.e. they're throwing the ball around. And he fits in perfectly to a strategy as a coach who's a footballer. He can pass, he can step, he can run as quick as a winger. So obviously if he gets the fundamentals right with his scrummaging, he's tight play in the maul, because sometimes we underestimate the value of a destructive second row in that maul who can split things up, who can get in early, has that little bit of nous about stopping the opposition, get set, all that stuff. So they're the little fundamentals that you really would look to, and that's what Paul O'Connell would want first and foremost. The other stuff just comes naturally to Ryan Baird. I think he's a wonderful footballer, but we shouldn't expect too much from him too soon. But you know, at this stage, I have no issue with him playing at this level, because I think he's good enough, and I think he's only going to get better.
Matt, before we touch on England, we must look at Johnny Sexton. Peter O'Mahony saying yesterday he's actually changed rugby in Ireland. It's his last game in the Six Nations for his country, level on points with his good mate Ronan O'Gara, 557 for the all-time Six Nations points record. Probably will overtake that if he kicks 3 points or at any stage, which let's hope he will, which he should. But what has he done in your eyes for Irish rugby?
He's iconic, isn't he? I think the biggest thing about Johnny, before we get to what he's done for Irish rugby, is there was a number of flexion points in his career where I thought maybe this is the end of a very long but spectacular road. And each time I've thought that, he proved all of us wrong, because it wasn't. I remember it was a discussion in 19 with a whole lot of really good rugby guys from Leinster, some old heads there, and we all thought, look, he's been great, but he's finished. And he doesn't just reinvigorate, he reinvents. He gets better. And I think what he's done for Irish rugby is what he's done for Leinster for years. He demands standards. People, you know, coaches do set standards, as Alan knows, but really it's when the players start demanding of each other, and the players set super high standards, and they hold each other accountable. That's when teams really grow and move and develop. You know, Alan was part of a wonderful Munster side I know did those sort of things, and we've seen Leinster do it over the years. And Sexton has great sides, that Leinster and Ireland have had great sides. He has demanded even more week in, week out. And it's made people believe in themselves. It's made people believe, you know, the rubbish that, we can't go out as favourites. Like those days are over. The rubbish that we can't take on big packs, those days are over. Like, what is it he hasn't done? And he has driven those standards as a leader. Sometimes he's grumpy. Sometimes we said, he shouldn't speak like that. He shouldn't show his frustration. But that guy is a winner. And for too long in Irish rugby, when I was there, we would deny ourselves the belief that we can win. And Johnny has given Irish rugby that unrelenting belief that the whole organisation can win, and the rest of the team is responding to it. And this is not a good Irish side. This is a great Irish team that I think will win the Grand Slam this weekend. Adding to it their incredible achievements, what they did in New Zealand, the November internationals. And therefore, Johnny's put himself and his team in a great position to go out at the World Cup in a really powerful position.
Yeah, Alan, even this week, he was all about process. It was nothing to do with him. He's just a born winner, isn't he? And he's going to be missed so much.
Yeah, he is. He's a once in a generational type player. I know maybe people would. I saw a lot of characteristics of what Johnny has in Ronan O'Gara, and I think they both similar in the temperament. The ability to bounce back from setbacks, the narkiness that both of them have and have had.
Absolutely.
Rog still has it, doesn't he, Matt?
That's right.
And I've always said this, they don't come around very often. Has there been another Ronan O'Gara in Munster? No, there hasn't. In the 15 years that I played with him and in the time since, there has been no one else that's been as consistently good and at that level. So they don't just grow on trees. And it's the same with Johnny Sexton. We've been talking about this now for 7 or 8 years. Who's going to replace Johnny Sexton? Who's going to replace Conor Murray when they go? Because Sexton, Murray, remember, for a number of years, world class, world class, world class. That's what we were saying. They were on, was it Line Tour 13, 17. Should have both been there in 21 as well. But Sexton obviously wasn't selected. But there was 3 Lions Tours there that you could say they should have been, they deserved to be there. So Johnny's dominated this kind of arena and this level for a long, long time. And you don't just replace guys like that. We've had the debate, is what I'm trying to say, who's going to replace Johnny Sexton and the gap. We talk a lot about the gap. So sensational player, but also character-wise, he's the type of guy who you want to play with, but not play against, because you'd want to try and, as a wing forward, you'd be going after Johnny Sexton because you think he's narky, he's giving lip to the referee, he's vocal, he's in your face, but you love him if he's on your team. You love him if he's with Ireland or with Leinster. And I love the fact that Johnny Sexton wears his heart on his sleeve. That gives me a buzz. I would like to think I tried to do that myself. A lot of the times, sometimes it got me into trouble. But I love the fact that he's honest, he's straight up, and he's someone you'd like to be in the trenches with. So obviously, from a quality point of view, he's kicking, he's running, he's passing, he's a top class player as well. But I think the added value with Johnny Sexton is that temperament and that aggression and that will to win and desire. It's very hard to coach that in players, Matt. He has it, so much of it, and he's been an absolutely outstanding leader for this group for a long time. I know he's captained this team for the last couple of years. I go back to the game in France with Italy when, you remember, he was taken off and Ireland were beaten by France. It was the rearranged game.
Yeah. And
he seemed to be sulking a little bit coming off, and people questioned his temperament and it wasn't the right behaviour and he should have been portraying something different. Andy Farrell came out more or less, said no issues with that. That's emotion. That's the passion I want. So he's had a few narky moments, but I love the fact that you can't beat this guy. You can knock him and knock him and knock him and lose, and he just wants to come back, and he inspires people around him. So, even I keep referencing New Zealand last year. I interviewed him at the start of that tour, and I remember just sitting down with him before the first test, and he made me start to believe that they're going to do this. Because I was a little bit glass half full. This is a daunting task, and Matt, no matter who you are, how good you are at any stage, going to New Zealand is really difficult, whether you're with your club side, and you've been there with Super Rugby as well, Matt. It's a tough place. And, he believed that they were good enough, they do their job, if they turn up, if they front up. And he made me start thinking, God, I'd love to be there. I'd love to be involved in this. And then they did it in the end. So his mental strength is phenomenal, and very humble guy away from it. People say this narkiness. There's two sides to sports people, Johnny is a real warrior on the field, and he's gentle, he's quiet, he's different off it, and he's very polite. And so I love that fact. And I referenced Ronan there. Ronan was so many characteristics the same, temperament-wise. And obviously, Rog delivered for numbers of years and got 124 or 5 caps for Ireland. Johnny Sexton's, over 100 caps as well. Iconic figures. And I think he deserves all the praise he gets, Johnny Sexton, because he's been wonderful ambassador for this country.
Well, he's not done yet. Of course, we have a World Cup down the line. But Matt, if we bring it back to Saturday and we look at England, obviously that record home defeat to France, it looks like, we don't know their team yet, but it looks like it's going to be Farrell, Tuolangi and Slade. Can they cause Ireland any problems? Surely there's going to be a backlash, and they're still good players, Matt.
Stu, the plus for England is they can't get any worse. Like, I'm not trying to be a smart aleck there. They just couldn't play as poorly as they did last week, surely, because they were horrible. They were really, really bad in every aspect, systemic problems within that team. As I said, their defence in every area, set play was poor, phase play was poor, their kicking game. Like, I don't know what they were trying to do with their kicking game. Like, the kick to France, kick to Ramos. You think of the points that they gave up from absolutely horrid kicks to Ramos. They were slow. Their ruck ball was so slow. The French defence just dealt with them. When they lifted the pace, when Owen Farrell came on in the second half there and Mitchell came on at 9, the pace of the English attack jumped, and they caused France some problems and scored a very good try there at the beginning of the second half. And coming back to Alan's point before, the teams that are going successful around the world is attacking. And what is the key to that is the pace of the ruck and the pace of the game. So to stop rushing defence, it's playing really fast rugby, putting your skills under pressure. It's what Jamison Gibson Park does so brilliantly for Ireland, is he speeds the ruck time up. You could see they have the stat there now, how long does each ruck take. And the Irish, the number of Irish rucks under 2 seconds was phenomenal, 1.5 seconds. And the number of English rucks over 3 seconds is staggering. And that's their problem. And then you have players like these great players. We know Maro Tojo is a great player. He was anonymous last week. The English back row were just demolished. The statistics that came up, they were not even registering on many of the statistics. Whereas the French, it had ball carriers, Olivon, 9, his equivalent Willis, 3. Like, the numbers that went through on everyone between the French back row and the English back row weren't 8, 9 or 10, 11. They were 8 or 9 for the French, 12 for the French, 2 or duck egg for the English. So they were off the park everywhere. And you just got to say that just being the athlete and the competitors you are, and the humility, the humbling experience and the abuse you'd be getting during the week, that Saturday can't come around quick enough for this English side, because they just want to get it out of their system. And any of us, you were talking about Johnny being a competitor. Everyone that's involved in international rugby, they're competitors. They just, and for the English, it must be like chewing razor blades all week. I do believe there'll be a response. I do believe they'll come out. I think that three-quarter line with Tuolagi at 12 is the best that they've put out for some time. I think Tuolagi is a talismanic figure for him. I think it was another error that the English selectors have made in leaving him out. I know he's been injured. I know he's been suspended, so you can't blame him for everything. But I still can't see England getting everything that needs to be got together for that side to beat Ireland at the Aviva, when Ireland have been so magnificent and so brave, driving themselves, overcoming so many obstacles like they did last week. I just can't see England doing that. Now, if we think back to the last time we had a Grand Slam, there was 2 things to put into that. One was they had you can't say luck. Sexton did a drop goal against France in Paris in the rain in the last seconds. On every Grand Slam, every team has a day where they almost get done. They have to overcome some great adversity. Ireland did it that day in Paris. They also did it last week in Murrayfield. They overcame incredible adversity, from Josh van der Furth throwing the ball in, all those injuries. We know about it. Brilliant. And then we went to Twickenham on St. Patrick's Day, not the St. Patrick's Day, and the first 40 minutes is as good a 40 minutes as I've ever seen in an Irish team play. They were magnificent, equal to the first 40 minutes against France or any of the halves in the test matches down in New Zealand. Now, I just believe we're going to see the same thing. Everything is pushing this Irish team to grab history, and this English team is not as good as that one. I just can't see them getting together all the things they need to get together to really pose a match-defeating threat to Ireland.
Quinny, would you go along with Matt there? Can you were twicking him last week? Obviously, it must have been very, very flat to say the obvious, but can you see them coming to Dublin and really? I presume it's going to be all physicality if they play Tuolangi and they're bringing back, the likes of Johnny Hill is in the second row. Are these guys going to come and just try and beat up Ireland? But from what I've seen, that's not going to happen. But maybe I can't see that.
I think there's obviously pressure on Ireland here because of the expectation, and like I said at the start, they've dealt with that pressure really well. I think they're a very humble group, and that comes from the coach. I don't think if Ireland were to lose this game, Stuart, there is no way that we'll go back and say they underestimated England, because there's no way they're going to underestimate England this week. There's too much experience there. Will they have trained easy? Well, they probably have, not done the same physical work with a 6-day turnaround and given the injuries they had. But there's no way the coaches here and the players themselves will underestimate England in any way. The very obvious threat is the physicality. We've got Genge, Sinclair, who both their props didn't play well last week. Genge was talking a lot to the referee. I think he lost his focus a little bit. Maro Itoje had one or two moments where I think he got one clean turnover, one spoil situation in line out. But I didn't see him throughout the whole game making any carries, any sort of big tackles. Their back row was totally anonymous. I don't think they're going to be as bad. France were very good. But I do think they're better than that. So I think they will be better. And I think if they get some little bit of cohesion, which is hard to see them, particularly in multi-phase. So if Ireland can be strong defensively, particularly in 1 to 5 phases, well, then where do England go after that? Because I think we've seen throughout this championship, they lose their shape then. I don't think their speed of movement on the ground is good enough. I don't think their fitness is good enough. But they are big and strong. So if they cause a little bit of damage in phase 1, 2, 3, 4, of course they can hurt Ireland. They can kick penalties. They can even for Freddie Stewart's try against France in the second half, that was a very direct, maybe 4 or 5 phases and try. They have some really good players, and I think Tuolangi certainly can cause damage to any defence. But Ireland are at a level. I don't like the fact that all we're doing is talking Ireland up. That's all I'm doing all week. That's all I'm hearing. But it's the reality. England have loads to lose here, because if they lose this game, it'll be the 3rd year in a row they've only won 2 games in the championship. That's a shocking return for English rugby. I think they won the championship in 2020 with 4 wins. They won the Six Nations tournament. So the following 2 years, won 2 games, finished 3rd and finished 4th. So I think there's a lot of pressure on them, and it will instill a fight and a reaction. Ireland just have to be calm and really be ready for that physicality. But I'm not sure I'd like to be taking on Tadhg Furlong or Dan Sheehan or Andrew Porter on that front row. They're no slouches themselves, James Ryan physically looks back to his best. He looks really imposing, aggressive, and the back row has been superb. So there's a bit of dog in that Irish pack as well. But certainly they've got to be careful. They've got to get the emotion right and not get dragged into a fist fight, if you like. I believe they can handle one, but I just think it's risky business. I think Andy Farrell will want them to stick to their structure, their plan, obviously win collisions, because if you lose collisions at this level, it can snowball. And they'll be clinging on to the fact that 4 years ago they came and smashed Ireland. They kicked the ball up in the air. They won all the aerial battles. And when you think of Malins and Anthony Watson and Freddie Stewart, they have some pace and guile out in that back line, but we haven't seen it. So, yeah, I think it's probably the most obvious one, to go back to your question, is the physical side of the game is how they can unsettle Ireland. But I think they'll definitely throw a little bit of caution to the wind. They've been programmed to play a phase or two and kick, play a phase or two and kick, try and get into the kind of green zone and then, outmuscle the opposition. I think if they play a little bit, they can be quite dangerous. So Ireland need to be aware of that.
Matt, a final one on this Grand Slam, the Cider, so to speak. 1948 in Belfast, 2009 in Cardiff, 2018 in Twickenham. Like, it's going to be some day if Ireland get it done for the fourth time a Grand Slam, but in their own backyard in Dublin.
Great day for Irish rugby, isn't it? What a scene. Patrick's Day weekend, Sexton's last Six Nations game, probably his last game at home, possibly if he doesn't play in the World Cup warm-ups. It's all set. The rain, unfortunately, as it's predicted, may help England. I think it was a dry day. I'd be almost putting your house on Ireland because of the expansive way they play. But it's just set up. And, it's what we love about the Six Nations, what got me into it as a kid, seeing these days. You go back to the great Welsh sides of the 70s and the 80s, and the French sides in their pomp. And it had something about it that was just special and extra. And Ireland seemed to be robbed of that over many years. We only watching the show the other night about the great team under Willie John McBride that should have won a Grand Slam because the troubles, it never happened. That Scotland and Wales didn't come over, but England did. But that team had beaten France. That could have been the year that they won their Grand Slam at home. And finally, 50 years later, here's the chance. And I know what Al's saying about them getting their mind right and not thinking they've already got it won. I'm certain that at some point, maybe in the change room last week after the Scotland game, someone has said, don't believe that this chance is going to come again. Don't just sit there and believe, there'll be another one. Like Sexton knows for him, there isn't another one. This is his last shot at a home winning Grand Slam. And all through that term, I'm certain that's been put home by the wisdom in the coaching staff and saying, here, boys, here's opportunity. You don't get in life second opportunities sometimes. This is it. This is the one. And I hope they grab it. It's going to be full of people. It's going to be an electric atmosphere. It's going to be absolutely special. Here's the next part, mate. This is a fabulous Irish team. This is the best Irish side I have seen in my lifetime. And they are being brilliantly led by Farrell and his staff. And they have belief. And if you got a team that looks at each other and says they believe we can do this, they will do it. I believe they will do it. And you only have to look back. That's not just movement with rhetoric. You look back at last week. You look at the difficulties that team faced, the obstacles they had to come, how they had to adjust their game plan. And they didn't adjust and just, a drop goal in the last 10 seconds. They were magnificent at Murrayfield. That game was a big, big game. They're coming into this like excited, jumping up, let it start. And I think it's going to be one of Irish rugby's great days.
Let's hope so. But Alan, we must touch. There are two other games this weekend. Must touch on them. You wouldn't think they were. Wales against France. Wales going again back to the old school. Another number of changes from Warren Gatland. France, okay, it's an outside shot, but they can, I suppose, technically still win the championship. Which way do you see that going?
Well, given what we saw last week of France, I think they just took their game to a different level. They were outstanding at Twickenham. I think England obviously had their problems, which we've spoken about. But I just think France, Sean Edwards said it afterwards, that was their best performance since he's been there. And I believe that's correct. When they're on in that kind of form, mixing power with pace, real evasiveness, confidence. And, Matt lives there. He knows what it's like. Play with it in club team in France or the national team. The mentality just changes. Someone makes a line break and they just become ignited. And so I think they'll kick on. I think it's going to be really difficult for Wales. Obviously, it was a vital win for them in Italy last week. And I thought they showed a bit of steel and resilience, which was pleasing to see. Their backs are to the wall. It's been a dreadful championship for them and for Warren Gatland. I was glad that they got a performance. I think, we were obviously really happy with the way Italy have played up to this point in the tournament, and saying they're back and they're competitive again. And, you know, credit to Wales last week. They had a really tough situation where, again, me included, was predicting that Italy would win that game. So, you know, Wales chopping and changing again from Warren Gatland, but it's a daunting task. But you'd have to fancy France here, given what they did, as I said, at the weekend, and they just grow in confidence. But it's an interesting one now because, you know, we talk about Ireland's mentality a lot. This French mentality has kind of wavered a little bit. I think they gave a reminder to everyone last weekend what they can do. If they show a ruthless edge here and back it up against a really desperate Welsh team who have a fair bit of experience in their team, that's the interesting point for me. Can France kick on and get another ruthless performance? But you'd have to imagine that France will probably be that bit too strong for Wales at the weekend.
We'll see how they get on if they back that up and are too strong for Wales, as you say. Matt, last game, Italy v Scotland. You actually thought Italy should have beaten Wales if they had taken their chances. And then the other hand, it looks like, you know, with Finn Russell and Stuart Hogg out, Ben Healy's going to get his chance as well, make his debut. So a massive day for him if he gets a chance.
Yeah, huge day for Ben. Good luck to the young man. You know, he's followed a dream, and you can't knock people for that. But I think it's going to depend on a couple of things. How well both teams recover emotionally from the defeats they suffered, because Scots have been really criticised at home for their second half performance, and, you know, so they should be. Like, if at halftime I thought, how can Ireland win this? I've said it 3 times in the podcast, but when I saw Josh Van der Fleer walk up with the ball behind his head to throw on the line out, I went, oh wow, this is going to be tough. Yet Ireland dominated the second half, completely dominated. So mentally and emotionally, that Scottish side has been smashed. How they bounce back, and this is against Italy, and this is not playing Wales or something. You know, it's really hard mentally against Italy sometimes because everyone expects you to win. Now, this is a very good Italian side. But then you've got to look at the Italians. How are they emotionally and mentally after the game when they thought they should win? We thought they should win, and they didn't. So this is going to be, I think it's going to be a lot closer than everyone thinks. I don't think this is any way lay down Misère for Scotland. I think Scotland should win this game, but this is a different Italian side, and it's another test for them. We've seen how they performed being underdogs. First time they were on top, and they didn't finish off. They didn't have that ruthlessness. Made all these great line breaks, but didn't have that killer instinct that Alan's talked about with Johnny. That, you know, like, he would have finished that team, that Irish team would have made those breaks and then scored 2-3 phases later. And that's what this Italian side's missing. Can they recover? I actually think it's going to be a really tight game. Really, really tight game. Scotland, yeah, you've probably got to give them the edge. But without Russell and without Hogg, it's going to be a close one. And I think France will be far too strong. Because there's one thing I just want to add on Alan's point. France do not play away again until the end of next year's Six Nations, where they'll play Wales and Scotland away. So they're at home now, except for those 2 games for a year. So they are not only a good bet for the World Cup, they're a pretty good bet for next year's Six Nations. And this will be their first marker on that. So the other game's still very, very exciting and relevant, I think, for all rugby people.
Yeah, and let's hope with the 3 games that they're all crackers. And lads, I know you're looking at me there very politely and happily. We're getting the predictions. Quinny, straight to you. What are we saying?
Oh, Scotland. I think they'll be home wins. Scotland, France, and Ireland. I got a few of them wrong last week, didn't I? I said Italy and England would win. But I think this week, I think Scotland will have a little bit too much. I do agree with Matt. You know, when you've no Hogg or Russell there, maybe it'll change him a little bit. But I still think they're physically capable, and look, obviously they're looking to bounce back themselves. So I think Scotland will have a bit too much for Italy, and I think France will, you know, overpower Wales. I think it's just when you see the team and you start looking at the players. Antonio is back for France as well. Incredibly powerful. So I think they'll win, and I think Ireland win as well. Given we've I'm not sure if you've seen it, we have the English team. It's just out a couple of minutes ago. So I think Stuart, you can call that out. There's no huge surprises. I think Tuolangi's back in. Henry Arundel is on the wing. David Ribbons.
Maratoji, Ribbons.
Yeah, Ribbons is in the second round.
Alex Dunbron. So you're right. There's no real surprises there.
I'm surprised in a sense that he's gone with the same back row in Ludlam, Jack Willis and Dombrand. Yeah. I think Ribbons coming in obviously comes in for Ollie Chesham. He's injured. Ribbons is a physical player. Not sure if you remember the Northampton Munster game. He was involved in a few of those scuffles over in Northampton, and he's quite physical. Van Poortvliet at scrum half, for me, his passing is good, but he's been pretty slow. It'll be interesting to see if they change things up. But Farrell is back in at 10. And, again, is it doing any good to Marcus Smith that this chopping and changing is going on? I don't know. I still think Farrell is a great player. I really do think he's a great player. But Tuolangi, for me, gives them that little bit of power in the middle. And, so it's on paper still a strong English team, but the one area that jumps out for me is the back row. If their back row perform as they did last weekend, Ireland will win comfortably. If they get involved, get stuck in, focus on trying to steal ball and get their hands and make some carries, I think they can cause Ireland problems. But they're my predictions anyway. So it's what did I say? Scotland, France, Ireland. Scotland, France, Ireland. So over to you, Matt.
Scotland, France, Ireland with Quinny. I'm with you. Van Poortvliet's not international standard, and that back row won't make it. But Tuolangi will make a difference. I feel very sorry for Marcus Smith. Looks like he's blamed for last week. It wasn't Marcus Smith's fault in any way. But that also tells you that English side, like when you're making chop and changes like that, they don't know what they're going. The big problem around that English attack is not just Farrell and Manu Tuolagi going to the line. Farrell's got to have other people with him, like Sexton does, going to the line. People in motion, people that are going to ask questions of the defence. And right now their attacking system doesn't have that. I think Ireland will be too strong. I think France will win easily in Paris, and they'll feel very comfortable in Paris with full house cheering them on. And I agree, Scotland should have too much. And I think because of Jamie Ritchie's leadership, we'll be driving that attitude of let's prove ourselves in this last game. But still, as a Six Nations, it's a great weekend. Grand Slam for Ireland. It's on Virgin Media. What else could we ask? We're going to be part of it. It's exciting, really exciting.
You're right, Matt. You said it is on Virgin Media. We're looking for some history. Lads, it's been a pleasure as always. Don't forget to tune in. First up, France v Wales, and then the big one, Ireland v England, go for that fourth Grand Slam. Let's hope it happens. Fingers crossed. Thanks, lads, for listening and watching.
Cheers, boys. Thanks.
Cheers, lads. Bye now.